It's not the medals they remember. Yeah, it's the silence you carry after the war. Some moments can be ignored. Others demand action. What happens when an ordinary day in an office turns into a reckoning? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe, as we follow a veteran whose presence speaks louder than any uniform. Full name? Derek Callahan barely looked up from his screen. His fingers tapped lazily at the keyboard, the click-clack sound echoing louder than the words he mumbled. Thompson. Nicholas Thompson, came the response, calm and measured. Derek finally glanced up. He didn't see the posture of a soldier. Didn't register the crisp precision of how the man stood, feet together, hands clasped loosely behind his back, eyes forward. All he saw was an old guy, worn shoes, outdated coat, and eyes that hadn't blinked once since walking up to the desk. Reason for your visit? Derek leaned back in his chair, spinning slightly to one side, reaching for his energy drink. I was told my pension has been suspended. I'm here to resolve it. Nicholas's voice carried no frustration, no demand. It had the tone of someone used to patience, a man who had learned the world owed him nothing, even after giving it everything. Derek sighed. Do you have an appointment? I called ahead. They told me I could walk in today before noon. Yeah, well, that's not how it works anymore, Derek muttered. We moved to a digital queue last month. You'll need to schedule through the system. He gestured vaguely at a touch-screen kiosk across the waiting area. Over there. Nicholas didn't move. That system doesn't work. I tried. It locks me out after the ID check. Derek gave a short laugh, mostly to himself. Then, maybe you need someone younger to walk you through it. For the first time, Nicholas's gaze shifted slightly, just enough to notice a line of chairs occupied by other veterans, some older, some younger, all silent. A few glanced up but quickly returned to their phones or papers. No one spoke. I served 34 years, Nicholas said, finally. 3 wars, 7 bases, 11 foreign deployments. I'm not here asking for favors. I'm asking for what was promised. Derek's eyebrows lifted, mocking. Look, I get it. You've got history. But history doesn't move you up in the queue. We've got a process. You're not special. Nicholas didn't flinch. Behind him, a woman in a beige wool coat sat quietly, her purse nestled in her lap. Her silver hair was braided back neatly, a small cross pinned to her scarf. She watched the exchange, her lips pressed into a firm, thoughtful line. Nicholas spoke again, softer now. Young man, I've buried friends in this country's soil, friends who didn't get to grow old. The least this country can do is honor its word. Derek stood up, finally engaging, but with irritation, not respect. Are you done? Because I've got 8 more claims to process and about 20 people more polite than you waiting for their turn. Nicholas took a small step back, nodding slowly, like a man who's not surprised, just tired. He turned without another word. The room stayed quiet. Too quiet. Not even a cough, not even a rustle of newspaper. The woman in the beige coat stood. She didn't walk toward Derek, she walked toward the exit, her steps fast and focused, her expression unreadable. Once outside, she took out her phone, not the kind you text with quickly, but the kind that has real numbers, big buttons, and a scratched screen. She scrolled through the contacts with purpose and hit 1. When the voice answered on the other end, she didn't say hello. She said, General Brennan, it's Maggie Shaw. You need to come to the VA office right now. Inside, Nicholas sat on the edge of a cold metal chair, his hands folded in his lap, staring at the wall in front of him. His military ID peeked out from a folder he hadn't even been allowed to hand over. On the edge of the folder was a photo, faded and worn, of a younger Nicholas, arm around a fellow soldier, both covered in dust and laughing, their helmets tipped back just enough to see their eyes. He looked down at the photo, then closed the folder. It didn't matter how many medals you earned, How many times you stood between danger and your brothers? Eventually, everyone waits in line. Derek watched him from the desk, a smirk dancing at the edge of his mouth. Another relic, he thought. Another old man who thinks the world stops spinning because he once wore camo. "Mr. Thompson," a voice called from a side door. It wasn't Derek. A woman in professional clothes, hair tied in a sleek bun, stood with a clipboard. "Room 3. I'll help you now." Nicholas stood, but before he could take a step, Derek snapped, "He's not in the queue. He didn't go through the system." The woman didn't blink. "He's in mine." As Nicholas passed, he looked at Derek one last time. Not with anger, with disappointment. The hallway was narrower than Nicholas remembered. Not this one specifically, but all of them. The ones he'd marched through in uniform. Clipped steps on polished floors, orders echoing in the air. This hallway had none of that. It smelled of printer toner and burnt coffee. The walls were a pale gray, like someone had taken all the memories from the building and whitewashed them. The woman led him into a small office with a cracked leather chair and a desk cluttered with old files. Her name tag read Rachel W., Veteran Services Coordinator. She gestured for him to sit, then closed the door gently behind them. "I saw what happened," she said. "No need for introductions. And I'm sorry." Nicholas nodded slightly. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't disrespect me." She sat across from him, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, but I work here. That makes me responsible in a way." Rachel opened the file he had brought and began scanning through the paperwork. "This suspension of benefits, it happened a few weeks ago?" 3, Nicholas said. "I called. They said it was a system error. I sent documents. Nothing came back. Then the letter arrived saying my pension was on hold due to verification lapse. I haven't moved in 10 years. She winced. "Yeah, that line shows up when something glitches and flags your profile for review. Usually someone overrides it, or they're supposed to." He studied her face as she worked. There was no smugness in her, no detachment. She typed with purpose, eyes focused, like someone who knew time mattered. "Your service record is extensive," she said after a moment. 34 years. Multiple citations, Bronze Star, Distinguished Service Medal, retired at full rank. Nicholas didn't respond. His shoulders remained square, but his hands were folded tightly. Rachel paused. "If you don't mind me asking, why now? Why come in person?" Nicholas looked at her, and for a second it was like the weight of 8 decades sat behind his eyes. "I buried my wife last year. 42 years married. She handled most of the paperwork, taxes, bills. I knew how to fight. She knew how to live." Rachel's hands hovered over the keyboard. "When she passed, the pension was all I had. She made it stretch. I just want to be able to buy groceries without counting coins. Keep the heat on. Send something to my granddaughter when she graduates. Nothing big." Rachel swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have to come down here and beg for that." "I'm not begging. I'm asking my country to keep its word." Her voice came softer this time. "We'll fix it, I promise." Outside the small office, Derek strutted past the glass windows, a cup of coffee in hand, clearly making a show of ignoring the door. 2 other clerks sat at a desk nearby, murmuring to each other, their glances quick and whispered. Rachel tapped through several screens, fingers dancing with familiarity. Then her brows furrowed. She leaned closer to the monitor. "What is it?" Nicholas asked. "There's a lock on your file. Someone tagged it with an audit flag, which isn't uncommon, but the override is restricted." "Restricted?" "Meaning only someone higher up can lift it, which is ridiculous, because you are already verified through the dud retirement system. This shouldn't be happening." Nicholas sat still, waiting. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was purposeful, like a man waiting for a diagnosis he already suspected. Rachel stood up. "Give me 10 minutes. I know someone upstairs. She's with the regional compliance team. If I bring this to her, we can escalate it." Nicholas nodded. I'll be here." As she stepped out of the room, the door clicked gently behind her, and Nicholas leaned back. The chair creaked beneath him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook, tattered, its edges frayed from years of use. Inside were names, units, dates. Notes in clean block letters, some of them crossed out, some underlined. There was a name near the top, circled twice: Elias J. Thompson, his grandson, the boy who joined the Army 2 years ago, infantry, based out of Fort Benning. Nicholas had written him 3 letters. Never sent any of them. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock, not from the door, but from the window. A face peered through the glass. It was Maggie Shaw. He opened the door slowly. "You didn't have to wait," Nicholas said. Maggie offered a small smile. "I didn't. I made a call. And now I'm just watching history try to correct itself." He looked at her carefully. "Who did you call?" "An old friend," she said. "The kind of friend who doesn't forget what someone like you gave up so the rest of us could argue about coffee prices." Nicholas raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Maggie tilted her head slightly. "You still got fight in you?" He gave a soft chuckle. "I got enough." She looked past him into the room. "They treat you better in there?" "Some of them did. The others—" He paused. "They watched." Maggie nodded slowly, then leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something, Colonel. You ever get tired of being the bigger person?" He looked at her, a quiet flame in his eyes. "Every day." The hallway buzzed slightly. Rachel was coming back, fast. Her pace clipped, her expression sharper. "He's on his way," she said breathlessly. "General Charles Brennan. I don't know how, but Maggie—" she gestured. "Got him on the phone, and he didn't even hesitate." Nicholas straightened just a little, not in pride, in caution. "Charles Brennan," he repeated. "You know him?" Rachel asked. "I knew him before the stars. We were in Kandahar together. He saved a convoy, took shrapnel to the leg, and still pulled 2 of us out under fire." "Then maybe," Maggie said, "this is long overdue." They waited. Minutes passed like hours. And then, like a gust through steel doors, the air changed. A tall figure in a dark coat entered the hallway, his steps heavy, direct. Every head turned. Even Derek stood up instinctively, unsure why. The man didn't look around. He walked straight toward Nicholas and stopped only when they were face to face. Nicholas stood. The 2 men locked eyes. No salute, no words. It was a quiet nod that held more weight than 1,000 ribbons. The hallway was silent, until the general finally turned to the others, his voice cutting like gravel across concrete. "Which one of you thought it was acceptable to deny this man the dignity he's earned?" No one answered, but everyone knew who he meant. General Charles Brennan didn't yell. He didn't have to. His voice, though calm, had the weight of decades behind it, of combat orders issued under gunfire, of commands followed without question in moments when lives hung in the balance. That voice wasn't used to being ignored, and in that sterile hallway surrounded by clerks and polos and clipboards, it hit like a shockwave. Derek Callahan tried to square his shoulders, tried to wear defiance like armor, but his voice cracked before he could even muster a full sentence. I was just following policy, sir." Brennan turned slowly, the kind of turn that feels like a verdict. "What policy is that?" he asked. "The one where veterans are dismissed, humiliated, and told they're not special?" Derek swallowed, his eyes darting to the others in the office. No one stepped in to defend him. Nicholas stood silently off to the side, watching. He didn't smile. This wasn't vindication. Not yet. It was just the beginning. "I read Colonel Thompson's service file on the way here," Brennan continued. 34 years, 3 theaters of war, 2 commendations for valor. And you," his eyes bore into Derek, You decided that didn't entitle him to 10 minutes of human decency? I didn't know who he was, Derek muttered, trying to step backward. That's the point, Brennan snapped, eyes flashing. You shouldn't have to know. You treat every veteran like they might be carrying ghosts. The room had gone so still you could hear the whir of the old ceiling fan and the distant hum of a printer. Rachel stepped forward, voice steady. General, I was able to access his pension file. It was flagged incorrectly by Derek. The system didn't glitch. It was manually submitted under suspicious activity. Brennan's eyes didn't leave Derek. You care to explain? I thought it looked off, Derek said, his voice rising slightly. The dates didn't line up, the retirement status. It didn't look real because it wasn't on a screen in front of you, typed in your perfect font. Brennan's voice rose only slightly now. You saw an old man and assumed fraud? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Silence returned. Maggie Shaw stood near the doorway now, arms folded, a quiet storm in her eyes. Brennan turned away from Derek, his tone leveling. Rachel, override the lock. Reinstate the pension immediately. I'll be contacting the oversight office to launch a full audit of this branch. Rachel gave a firm nod and turned back to her screen. Derek opened his mouth again, but Brennan held up a hand without looking. If you say one more word, you're going to wish this was a court-martial instead of a human resources issue. Nicholas watched all of it quietly. He had seen men fall to pieces under fire, and here stood a man whose entire sense of authority was unraveling in the face of accountability. Then Brennan did something no one expected. He walked over to Nicholas and stood in front of him, not as a superior, not as a legend, but as a fellow soldier, and with slow, deliberate care he extended his hand. Colonel Thompson, you should never have been put through this. Not here, not anywhere. Nicholas shook his hand, firm and without ceremony. I've been through worse, he said, almost as an afterthought. But this one stung more than I expected. That's what bothers me most, Brennan replied, that you expected it. They stood like that for a moment, two old warriors in a building that had forgotten what it meant to serve. Then Nicholas spoke, quieter now. It's not about me, it's about the ones coming after. If they get treated like this, what do we stand for? Brennan nodded slowly. That's why I'm not just here for you. I'm here to fix this from the top down. The double doors at the front of the building burst open. A local news crew, tipped off by someone, Rachel maybe, or Maggie, stepped inside, camera already rolling. The front desk clerk tried to wave them off, but Brennan turned toward the reporter and nodded. Let them in. A young journalist stepped forward, microphone raised. General Brennan, is it true you're launching a formal review of how veterans are treated at VA branches like this one? It's not just a review, Brennan said. It's a reset. This office failed a veteran today, a decorated one. And if it happened to him, it's happened to others. The reporter's eyes shifted to Nicholas. Sir, would you be willing to speak on record? Nicholas hesitated. The cameras, the lights, the sudden, strange weight of becoming a symbol. Then he nodded. He stepped into frame, his posture as straight as ever, his voice clear. My name is Nicholas Thompson. I served 34 years in the United States Army. I'm proud of every one of them. But today, for the first time, I felt like none of it mattered. He let that hang in the air. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just asking, what do we owe the people who signed up to die, if necessary, for this country? And if the answer isn't dignity, then we've lost our way. The room went silent again. The camera light blinked. The reporter lowered her mic. Rachel returned to the group, holding out a new printout. Colonel Thompson, she said, your pension has been fully reinstated, with retroactive compensation. You should receive your deposit within 48 hours. Nicholas looked down at the paper, then back at her. Thank you. Brennan turned to Maggie next. You still causing trouble, Miss Shaw? She gave him a smile. Only the good kind. God bless that kind. As the reporters packed up, and the clerks began dispersing like ants after a storm, Nicholas sat back down in the same metal chair he had waited in earlier. Only now, the silence around him wasn't full of shame. It was full of change. And something else. Hope. 3 days later, the town square looked different. It wasn't the bunting or the folding chairs or the podium draped in stars and stripes. It wasn't even the brass band warming up with practiced, clipped notes beneath the spring sun. It was the people, veterans in wheelchairs with medals pinned proudly to their chests, young recruits standing tall in dress uniforms, families, children holding tiny flags. And in the center of it all, a flagpole long neglected, freshly polished and newly welded at its base. Nicholas Thompson stood at the edge of the small crowd, his hands at his sides, his posture unshaken by the years. A new windbreaker replaced his worn coat. His cane, which he used only when he had to, rested against the chair behind him. He hadn't used it today. A familiar voice cut through the soft buzz of chatter. "Colonel Thompson," said General Brennan as he approached from the side, "it's a good day to raise a flag." Nicholas smiled. "It always is." Behind them, Maggie Shaw moved with quiet efficiency, helping organize the line of speakers, giving gentle instructions to volunteers, setting up the refreshment table. She caught Nicholas's eye and gave a nod. Brennan looked around. "You know this started with you, right?" "No," Nicholas said. "It started with people being quiet too long. I just chose not to be." Brennan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Well, someone needed to." The mayor took the stage, the microphone screeching once before settling. Her voice rang clear through the square. "Today isn't just a flag-raising ceremony. It's a moment of reflection and of correction. One of our own, Colonel Nicholas Thompson, reminded us that honoring veterans isn't about holidays or parades. It's about every ordinary day when someone who gave everything needs something in return." A ripple of applause moved through the crowd. Rachel stood at the back, hands clasped in front of her, pride glowing across her features. The spotlight wasn't hers, but the satisfaction of knowing she'd helped turn the tide filled her more than a headline ever could. The mayor continued, "In collaboration with the Department of Veterans Affairs and General Brennan's office, our local VA center will now host monthly accountability forums, open to veterans and their families. New staff training protocols are being implemented as of this week, and most importantly, a review task force has been launched to examine every denied benefit in our district over the last 5 years. Every single one." The applause now came louder, some people rising to their feet. But before any of that could happen, the mayor said, "Someone had to remind us that quiet dignity deserves to be heard." She turned toward Nicholas and motioned him forward. He hesitated for a beat. Then he walked, unaided, up the short steps of the stage. His hands didn't tremble as he adjusted the mic. "I don't have a speech," he said plainly. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. "I'm not great with ceremonies. I was better at battlefield briefings and training drills. But this moment? This one's different." He scanned the faces in front of him. Some young, many old, all watching. "I spent most of my life in uniform. I've watched friends go down beside me. I've written letters to widows. I've saluted caskets draped in flags just like the one we're about to raise. And through it all I believed in the promise that we'd be taken care of. Not as a gift, as a debt honored." He paused, the breeze catching the edge of the microphone cord. Edith broke in. "For a moment. But it didn't stay broken. And I hope it won't break again. Not if we keep holding the people in charge accountable. Not if we remind them that service doesn't end when you step off the battlefield. It echoes for the rest of your life." A stillness held the square like a breath waiting to be exhaled. Nicholas stepped down without another word. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent. Then the sound of the bugle began. Taps. Soft. Solemn. Each note a memory. As the final notes faded, 2 Marines approached the flagpole. They handed the flag, perfectly folded, to Nicholas. He took it in both hands and slowly unfolded it. the red, white, and blue catching sunlight in a ripple of fabric. With quiet care, Nicholas approached the pole and began to raise it hand over hand, the motion smooth and practiced. Every eye followed the cloth as it rose, higher and higher, until it reached the top and fluttered free. The crowd stood. Hands moved to hearts, some saluted, and in that moment no one saw an old man. He saw a sentinel standing for something larger than himself. After the anthem played, people moved in slow waves, greeting each other, shaking hands, sharing quiet smiles. A woman with a toddler came up to Nicholas and offered him a small paper card, hand-drawn in crayon. "Thank you, soldier." He took it gently, nodding once, and slipped it into his pocket like a medal. Rachel walked over. "They're already talking about naming a room at the center after you. I'd rather they just remember the lesson," Nicholas said. "Some lessons need names to stick," she replied, grinning. Brennan approached again. "I spoke to Washington. They want your help. A committee for nationwide reforms in veteran services. They'll listen to you." Nicholas chuckled. "Didn't think I'd be drafted again at 82. "They don't need your legs," Brennan said. "They need your voice." Nicholas glanced toward the flagpole again. The fabric danced proudly against the sky. "I suppose I have a little left to say." Maggie approached last, her hands in her pockets, her eyes warm. "You stood up, Nicholas," she said, "and the world moved." "No," he replied. "It remembered." She smiled. "Either way, it's standing with you now." As the event wound down and chairs were folded, Nicholas walked a quiet loop around the square. No cameras, no speeches, just one last look at a town rediscovering its spine. He paused by the flagpole once more, looked up, and saluted. A long, slow gesture, not for the cameras, not even for the crowd, but for the men and women who never came home, for the ones who did and were forgotten, and for the promise that now, finally, was being remembered. He lowered his hand, straightened his back, and walked forward, to a town that now knew his name, into a future where silence had given way to justice, and into the wind that carried the flag he once bled for, still flying, still proud, and never again ignored.